Welcome to The Big Seek. My name is Elias, and with your encouraging support, our channel will regularly be sharing fascinating and inspiring stories of faith and hope. Things that we are all constantly in need of, whether we realize it or not. If you're new here, we try to keep our videos short enough to respect your time. Try to watch this story until the end to feel inspired and possibly change the way you see your own story. Today, I want to tell you a story that many people still talk about, even years later. It didn't happen in a busy city. It didn't make the evening news. It happened far away, in the quiet of a mountain monastery, where an icon began to weep. Maybe you're thinking, I've heard of things like that before, but is it real? That's a fair question, but for the men who lived it, this wasn't legend, it wasn't rumor, it was something they saw with their own eyes, and it changed them. The monastery itself was small, stone walls weathered by wind and rain, a red-tiled roof that had been patched more times than the monks could count. It sat tucked against the side of a mountain surrounded by pine forests. To get there, you had to travel an unpaved road, then walk a narrow path for over a mile. In winter, that path was covered in snow and ice. In summer, it was steep and hot. Inside, life was simple. The chapel smelled of old wood and beeswax. Candles flickered, and in the center of it all, above the small iconostasis, hung the icon of the Virgin Mary. It wasn't elaborate. The paint was faded, the frame was cracked. But to the monks, it was precious. Only 7 monks lived there, most of them older men who had spent decades in prayer. Their faces were lined, their hands rough from work in the garden and chopping wood. But among them was one younger monk, Father Nectarios, just 32. He had left behind a steady job in the city. He could have had a family, a career, a different life altogether. But instead, he felt called to live in prayer, to serve quietly, away from the noise of the world. He was earnest, devoted, but also human. There were nights when he lay awake, wondering if he had made the right choice. He prayed, "Lord, am I where you want me to be, or did I just run away from life?" The monastery was struggling. Donations had slowed down. Pilgrims rarely visited anymore. The monks worried about paying for oil, candles, even food. And with the isolation of the mountain, every trip for supplies was hard. More than once, Father Nectarios overheard the elder monks whispering, "Maybe it's time to close the doors." Those words hit him hard. Close the monastery? After all these years? At night, in the small cell he slept in, he found himself whispering the same question over and over. "Lord, are you still here with us? Do you see us?" It was a cold morning in early spring. The snow hadn't fully melted. The monks filed into the chapel, their breath visible in the cold air. Father Demetrios, one of the oldest, lit a candle before the Virgin Mary's icon, as he had done thousands of times before. But this time, something was different. He leaned closer, his eyes widened. There, on the painted face of the Virgin Mary, was a drop of moisture. He thought maybe it was wax or oil, but when he looked again, he saw it clearly. A tear sliding down her cheek. He called for the others. "Come, quickly! Look!" The monks gathered. At first, they thought he was mistaken, but then they saw it. Another tear, forming, rolling down. Silence fell over the room. One monk began to tremble. Another dropped to his knees. Father Nectarios felt his heart pound in his chest. He whispered, "Mother of God, why are you weeping?" Some began to cry themselves, not out of fear, but something deeper, a mix of awe and sorrow. Of course, not everyone knew what to make of it. Father Nicolaus, practical and cautious, said, "Perhaps it's just condensation from the cold." Another suggested maybe oil seeped through the wood. But the tears didn't stop. They appeared again the next day, and the next. Father Nectarios prayed quietly, "Lord, if this is from you, don't let it just be a spectacle. Let it draw us closer to you." Soon, word reached the nearby villages. Pilgrims began to climb the steep path again. Some came with skepticism, others came desperate for hope. One woman, Maria, came after hearing about it from her neighbor. She had been battling illness for years. Doctors had told her there was little they could do. She walked slowly, leaning on her son's arm. When she entered the chapel and saw the icon weeping, she began to cry. "She suffers with us," she whispered. Later, she told the monks it was the first time in months she had felt peace. Another visitor, a father of 3, admitted he hadn't prayed in years. But standing before the icon, he found himself saying words he hadn't spoken since childhood. "Lord, have mercy." Day by day, the monastery changed. Where once it was silent and empty, now the chapel echoed with voices in prayer. The monks, who had feared they would have to leave, now found themselves welcoming crowds. Donations began to arrive. But more importantly, people's faith began to awaken. One evening, Father Nectarios stood outside as the sun set behind the mountains. He listened to pilgrims singing hymns inside the chapel. Tears filled his eyes, not because of the miracle itself, but because of what it stirred in so many hearts. For Father Nectarios, the greatest miracle wasn't just that the icon wept. It was that people were reminded they were not forgotten. He would often tell visitors, "Whether you believe the icon truly wept or not, what matters is this: God is here. He sees us. He cares. He hasn't abandoned us." And that truth carried him through his own doubts. You know, maybe you felt forgotten too. Maybe you've asked those same questions late at night. And maybe you never saw a weeping icon. But maybe a friend showed up at just the right time, or a verse you hadn't thought of in years came back to mind, or you felt peace when you least expected it. That's the thing. God doesn't always work the way we expect, but He is near, closer than we think. The monks in that remote monastery found hope again, right when they thought it was all slipping away. And maybe that's what you need to hear today. That even if you feel isolated, even if you feel forgotten, even if it feels impossible, God hasn't turned away. He still weeps with us in our struggles, and He still reminds us that His presence is real. Having you spend your valuable time to watch this video means a lot more than words can express. If you have already subscribed, your support is greatly appreciated. If not, please consider doing so to make sure you don't miss the next story of faith and hope, and of course, to offer us that all-important support we need. We cannot exist without you. Finally, if today's words of inspiration spoke to you, share it with those closest to you. You never know who might need it. Thank you for being part of this journey, and stay blessed.